The previous story was about this man of God that rebelled against his leader and broke away the church he was supposed to build from the hierarchy, a servant of God in a church within a community, who once rebelled against his pastor and subsequently destroyed his pastor reputation, ruining his image on earth. He thought he was preserving the truth, and unfortunately, he ended up in this place of unbearable torment. This story shocked me deeply. In any case, it resonated with me profoundly. I think I emphasized this point at the end of the show. So, I want to remind God's children that we were in the amphitheater. It was the first place after leaving Earth. Following the demons, we arrived at this location. It was on a field, and as I explained, in this amphitheater, that looked like ancient Roman Empire Colosseum, that were built primarily as a massive public entertainment venue designed to host gladiatorial combats and public spectacles, where exotic animals were hunted, and condemned criminals were executed. However, in hell, instead of execution of animals, it was souls of men that were placed in the middle of the arena to undergo the most unimaginable torment, for the pleasure of infernal demon. The torment of soul of men and women that had died in sin was a public entertainment for demon of hell, that came to watch macabre spectacle of suffering of humanity, and these demons sat on grandstands watching the torment of doomed souls. I saw this prince of hell who presented himself as the prince of this place, the prince of darkness at the services of darkness, a principality responsible for fleeting riches and the pursuit of earthly possessions. So, for a few minutes, he was speaking, as I said, in the amphitheater filled with cruel creatures. When the leader was speaking, these demons were in a dark joy, ready to pounce on these defenseless souls. The demons of all kind were seated on the grandstand. A heavy and ominous atmosphere now reigned, covering those there. As if darkness were the only way for them to breathe, the Dark Prince was speaking with an ironic tone of mockery, and the demons were truly in a dark joy, determined to pounce on the men and inflict excessive torment upon them. We were walking amidst rows of humiliated men. Man had no consideration there, man had no value, man had no dignity, no worth, no pride. Those who fall in the place of torment lose the respect due to man made in God image and God likeness. None of these things like dignity and consideration could be found here in the realm of demon, none of that. It was total humiliation and degradation. The worst possible treatment one can be subjected to. They were like people frozen in time, humiliated in eternal shame and astonished to find themselves in this dark place. So this demon prince ruled this part of hell, where souls of men who during their life on earth were animated with great desire to accumulate terrestrial wealth and earthly possession, forgetting the fate of their souls. The Bible say, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." This infernal world was segmented into compartments and sections, and each valley was ruled by a prince of hell. But this part of hell we had arrived was the lung of hell, and this prince was the leader who ruled. Behind him was a demonic army that he led, and these demons were sitting in the stands, observing like in a football stadium where spectators sit watching the players play, and now they were mocking the damned soul. These demons were truly keen to pounce on these poor men that arrived here. You could feel a terrible anger emanating from these infernal spirits. They had a deep hatred, rage and disgust for human beings. So the leader of this valley continued to address these doomed souls while they were going through extreme punishment, saying, "The fact that I am speaking cannot interrupt everything that is taking place here." He shouted in a deep voice, "Men, it has been said to you, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. This saying is certain, but your choices have established other masters over you and have led you here." He was trying to make men understand that they have arrived here because of their own sins. He said, "You yourselves chose to follow the path of perdition. There is a voice that seems right to a man, but its outcome is the voice of death." This prince of hell shouted loudly. These souls were speechless, but they really knew not what to say. They were watching him, talking while they were there tormented, tortured, The prince continued and said, "If you are here, it is your choice. Since today you have fallen here, you will face all accusations. Each one of you will have to plead his case. Either you plead guilty so that your torment is lessened, or you plead not guilty and we will consider your case." The men were asked to plead either guilty or not guilty. He said, "If you plead guilty, we will alleviate your torment. If you say I am not guilty, we will examine your case." Then said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you will be here for a long time. Enjoy your torment in your new abode. You will remain here forever." While he was speaking, he began to utter threats against the doomed souls. He began to abuse these poor souls with extremely vile words of insults. He blasphemed against God. He cursed humanity. He explained to them that he was against the fact that God created man in his image and likeness, offering them a chance of redemption when they fell. Yet there is no redemption for Lucifer and his army when they fell. They are bound to fall in the lake that burn with fire and brimstone, where they will always be from eternity to eternity. He began to utter words of curse. This prince was on his throne surrounded by his demons seated in truncheons. He began to utter words of condemnation against the men. As he uttered these curses, I saw a multitude of insects, incredibly venomous, pouring out of his mouth. They were wild insects. Their size is difficult to describe. When they came out of his mouth, all these insects moved towards the doomed souls in the middle of the arena. They stuck to their skin. They began to bite the men, saying that their body were bearing the mark of sin, which is with their food. I saw the men now in terrible torment. They tried to get rid of these insects, but it was almost impossible. These insects clung on them as if to show the men that their fate was sealed, and the Prince of Hell and countless demons seated on the grandstand were watching this gruesome suffering as if it was leisure, and they laugh and mock them. As the insects writhed and stuck to their bodies, I saw the souls of men trying to get rid of them. People were spinning on the ground. Men and women were uttering agonizing cries of torment because of painful punishment they had never known on earth. It was to remind God's children that sin is like a form of slavery. When you continue to pursue the path of perdition, you continue to commit evil, your body will be marked by your crimes, and there in hell those insects will find their meal, which is the sin that is inside your body. The sin that is identified on your body will be their food. Men and women were trying to get rid of the insect that were biting them, but it was so complicated. Those insects were savage. Truly, it was an army of wild insects devouring people like no other. I saw the souls of men spinning on the ground, some trying to run away. But there was nowhere to go because the area was surrounded, and the warriors' demon were sneering at the torment that people were enduring. I could hear the men and women that began to shout aloud. They began to cry out, "We can't bear this torment, we can't take it anymore, it's beyond." Church, it was a terrible punishment, a suffering beyond words. The men cried out with the last of their human strength, as if it were impossible pain. They cried out like crazy. They began to scream at these demons, "We can't take this." They sought mercy, asking them to ease their torment, saying it was unbearable. The demons seated on the stand who came to entertain themselves continued to laugh and mock these souls who tried to get rid of these insects that clung on them, but it was impossible, for these creatures clung on them with terrifying force. They caused atrocious suffering to the humans, and despite all their efforts, the men could not escape. The Prince of Demon continued and declared again aloud. He said, "Here is my army, truly welcoming you to your new home." And the demons were mocking them while these insects were stinging and tearing at the men, continuing to rip through their bodies. Brother, when you watch this scene, it's unbearable to see how proud man on earth finds themselves in this place, leaving behind all the goods. They were trying to get rid of an army of insects like no other. They ran, they tried, but it was impossible. So he continued to speak again. He said, "My army welcomes you to your new home." And while he was still speaking, while these insects continued to torture men, it was as if he wasn't satisfied. So, he uttered another terrible cry. When the cry was uttered, it came out of his mouth as if a great quantity of lava that were filling the arena. Then the flame engulfed the men already tortured, already tormented by insects. They were still engulfed now by the fact. Now that fact had no power over the insects. only the fact and the power over the human body. Now were these souls' torment ever alleviated? It was ironic, he was just mocking men because there's no middle ground where the plea can be effective. And when man stands before the Lord Jesus Christ on earth, it's Jesus who forgives sins, so there is no relief. Not really, there is no relief from the crimes that those souls suffered in that place. The torments were severe, of intense and inexplicable cruelty. The savage stings were also part of the torment, or the cruel moment of that place, certainly because they came from his mouth. He hurled them like a weapon of torture against the men. After that, he would hurl another, a second one, an effect of devastating heat beyond belief. It ravaged everything in its path. The men, truly engulfed by the stings, were tortured. There, humankind, and I insist, humankind had no consideration, so he mocked humanity, making them suffer with this immense and inexplicable cruelty. So, everyone there was treated with utter contempt. The fates of sinful humanity in that place seemed truly sealed. It was over, no matter that it was a temporary prison. But the path already followed determined that even if, at the end of the world, you would never escape again, you were in an eternal fate, there would be no change. So the men continued to seek his mercy. The men continued to beg them. They all pleaded guilty because they thought, as he had said, if you plead guilty, we will alleviate your torment. So they all pleaded guilty and now acknowledged their faults. He confessed their sins. They began to confess their sins. But their pleas seemed to be lost in darkness, I was about to say, because it was almost too late for them. While that evil spirit rejoiced in the torments of their suffering, the tortures were of indescribable severity. The men continued to beg. The men continued to ask for forgiveness. The men sought his mercy. Each one acknowledged their faults. Each one said, I am guilty, while the only opportunity to present this crime is while we are alive on earth. While we are still in this world of men, we can easily approach Jesus and confess our guilt. While we are still alive, you have still a chance to truly give your life to Jesus Christ. There in hell, despite seeking his mercy, it was impossible. There was no more forgiveness. It was too late. The fate was sealed, and this leader of demons continued to mock humanity. But the more they wept, the more he saw the agony of humanity. The more they sobbed in the flames, the more he continued to rejoice. He continued to unleash his savage army. He continued to breathe fire upon human beings. Revelation chapter 9 verse 6. In those days, people will seek death but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. And there, they sought death, but it was too late. Isaiah 14:11. Your Majesty descended into Sheol, with the blood of the dead beneath you and a layer of glass, and the glass was your covering. So then now, the demons continued to mock men. They continued to laugh. They continued, and men were begging them, saying, we cannot bear this, we cannot bear this torment. Each one pleaded guilty. Each one told their story. Each one said, yes, yes, I am responsible. If I am here, it is because I have sinned. But it is not to the devil that one should confess these sins. It is to the Lord that man must truly confess his faults, and the only opportunity, grace, is presented to us on earth. When the men kept shouting, I can't bear to go there, we were observing their torment with the Lord. It was unbearable. I was in utter shock. I started to cry. Dad, I said, the men are ablaze in the fire as if they were smoldering coals. It was unbelievable. The Lord was weeping and said, this was the man for whom I paid everything. I accepted death. I left heaven to die for men, but this is what they preferred. Their fate was sealed. While he was speaking, I made a few disturbing observations about this place. I noticed there was now a crowd. There were so many people. It was an immense crowd. Others had the appearance of animals, and some wore crowns. These people in the likeness of animal boasted of the services they had rendered to Satan on earth. These Satanists and which despite their torment were still making demands to demon they served. They claimed to have done Satan a great service during their earthly sojourn and that they had invested much in Satan. They had led multitudes astray. The devil promised them that after their life on earth they would be rewarded. So, They had fallen in torment after death. They were astonished and surprised to find themselves in this place. The devil never told them that after the end of their lives they would end up there. The devil promised them the beautiful kingdom of fallen angel. The devil promised them success, and some were even explaining that while they were on earth, they visited the devil's kingdom several times. They saw villas, they saw houses, they saw great riches and wealth, they had children in that world, but were shocked and wondered how did they end up there in torment after their lives. These people had even sold their days and years to Satan, saying, well, the devil asked them for a quota of their days and years, saying, if you die 30 years before the time appointed for your death, according to the divine calendar, you will come to live here in the beautiful kingdom of fallen angels. But how did they end up here? How did they become thousands of people like that? Among these Satanists I will mention two figures. First, there was Charles Russell, and also Joseph Smith. He was the representative, the founder of the kingdom known as Jehovah's Witness, and the other was the founder of the Mormon Church. So, these were the two figures I met there, Charles Russell and Joseph Smith. They were also great figures. I'll talk about several communities. Those two, anyway. So, those were the two men. That was the man I saw there, Charles Russell, and the other was Joseph Smith, and he was claiming to be the founder of the Mormon Church, which is also called the Church of Jesus Christ. He formed the church, that's the Jehovah's movement. I don't know how to attribute it, whether it's a church or not, and the other was the creator, the founder of the Mormon Church, which is called the Message, that's the Church of Jesus Christ of the End Times, the last day, I believe, the last day. So I saw these two men also claiming, they were claiming their rights. He said, we have worked for world destruction, to say here, no Jehovah's Witness will go to heaven, no Jehovah's Witness will be saved.